Welcome to the second episode of the Circle of Insight, where we provide you insight that you deserve. Today we have a special guest, Senior Deputy District Attorney Jeff Ferguson. Thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about criminal realignment. Now, the Circle of Insight is on Therapy Cable. The purpose of Therapy Cable is to provide access to people who fall prey to the two impediments of therapy, which is shame and stigma. Now you have a way to be able to access therapy, access information about mental health without in the privacy of your own home. But let's get right to it. We're going to learn a little bit about AB 109, which is Assembly Bill 109, formerly known as criminal realignment.
Right, criminal justice realignment.
Criminal justice realignment. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into that?
Sure. Well, I'm an Orange County native. I came here in 1962 with my family. Went to University of California, Irvine, where I got my undergraduate degrees. Then I went to law school, also again locally, and graduated cum laude. I joined the Orange County DA's office almost immediately after I got past the bar, and I've been a DA now 31 years here in Orange County.
How many times did you take the bar?
Once. Once was enough.
Indeed. And so now give us a little bit of information about this bill, this infamous AB 109.
Well, of course, the problem with that started AB 109 was prison overcrowding here throughout the state of California. And there were a group of people in California, activists, that sued the state in federal court to force some change in what they viewed was improper treatment of prisoners, particularly for mental health and medical care and overcrowding and things of that sort. And in fact, a federal judge and a panel of judges did find that essentially the conditions were resulting in cruel and unusual punishment fundamentally, and directed the governor and the state of California and the State Department of Corrections to fix the problem. Now, the court didn't say how to do it. They left that up to the legislature and the governor and policymakers. And so there were several ideas and several attempts and some false starts. But fundamentally, they came together, the legislature came together and drafted AB 109, which was designed fundamentally to reduce the prison population. I mean, that was its number one goal, to comply with the federal court orders.
Now, this has been going on for decades too, wasn't it? Or several years at least?
Well, not really. I mean, the last several years, the problems have been growing and mounting in the state prison system. But I think there were other solutions, but that's another show. But the fundamental fact is they were being overcrowded, and the federal court stepped in and basically said, you've got to do something about this. So what they decided to do ultimately was what resulted in AB 109. And AB 109 is a law with lots of moving parts. It's not a very simple law. It has a lot of features and a lot of details. And one of the first things that they concluded, they being, I'm talking about the legislature and the governor, was one way we can stop sending people to prison. Well, there's two things. First, we want to get people out of prison that are there now, earlier. Okay. The second thing is we want to stop sending people to prison, because that'll just keep filling up the prison. So one of the first things they did is they went through all the crimes in the state of California that are felonies, for which you are eligible to go to prison. And there are about 600 of those crimes that they decided you cannot go to prison anymore.
600 felonies?
600 different felonies.
Wow.
That if you commit that felony once, you won't go to prison. If you commit it 10 times, you won't go to prison. If you commit it 50 times, you will not be sent to prison. That doesn't mean you won't be incarcerated, but you won't go to prison. Some examples of those crimes would be automobile theft, so stealing a car, or automobile burglary, or commercial burglary where you throw a brick through a window of a store at night and steal $10,000 worth of electronics out of it.
So what happens if somebody steals a car for the second time in their career, we'll say, as a criminal? What happens to that person? Does he go to jail then?
Well, before AB 109, if you stole a car the first time, you're going to probably go to jail for some period of time, anywhere from 60 to 90 days, something in that range. It depends on a variety of factors. If you steal a car the second time, you're probably going to go to jail again before AB 109. Okay. It's not until you steal your third car, your fourth car, that you're really likely to be sent to prison. All right, and this is those were your starting crimes. In other words, there's a few that you commit your first felony, you want to try some rehabilitation or some attempt at that through probation. If you do your second one, maybe you made a mistake. by the time you've done your third or fourth car, people figure, well, you've kind of got a pattern down. And so you were eligible for prison. When you stole your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th car, you could be sent to state prison for up to 2, 4, or 6 years, and you would go to the penitentiary. Under AB 109, car theft is one of those crimes for which it's still a felony, but you are not eligible for prison. So if you steal your first car, your second car, your third car, your fourth car, your fifth car, instead of prison, you are going to be going to county jail.
Now, just to make sure the audience knows that there is a distinction between prison and jail.
Oh, definitely. There's a very huge distinction between prison and jail.
I don't know if you want to maybe elucidate a little bit on that.
Prisons are state facilities. In other words, there are several of those around San Quentin and Corcoran and so forth that are scattered around California, where felons who go to prison traditionally would be sent, and they'd be separated from their families and so forth and find themselves there. Prisons have different types of facilities. They tend to be larger facilities, larger buildings. They have large yards for people and prisoners to exercise. They have a lot more, except for the problems that the federal court found. I mean, they do have medical facilities, and they do have opportunities to learn trades and so forth. County jails, on the other hand, really were intended for local, short-time incarceration. Mm-hmm. So when you go to county jail originally, the idea was, well, we're going to keep you here for no more than a year, right? And much less than that. So you'd be in, you'd be out, and the population would continue to rotate. Furthermore, county jails really do not have, and traditionally have not had, all of the amenities that the prisons have. They don't have large yards. They don't have large exercise places. They have limited libraries. They have limited opportunities for skills and being taught trades. So county jails are very different than prisons. But now, and also the money's different. When you went to prison, the state of California was paying for the prisons. And obviously, it's all taxpayer money, but it's different pockets. With AB 109, now there's a tremendous pressure on local sheriffs and local boards of supervisors in every county in the state to house these people in county jail. And the trick is, let's take the car thief again. The car thief that did his fifth car is eligible for going to prison for up to 6 years. But he doesn't go to prison anymore, he goes to jail. But he could go to jail for 6 years. And
are they able to accommodate that?
That's the problem. That's one of the big problems that we have. In Orange County Jail, I believe we do have some prisoners that have been sentenced up to 16, 17 years in jail.
16 years?
Up to 16 years in local jail. Now, Here's another moving part. In an attempt, obviously they're worried about jail overcrowding.
Sure. So
in addition to taking those 600 crimes, and that includes other crimes like elder abuse, forgery, identity theft, a lot of crimes that can cause people tremendous grief in their lives. Mm-hmm. But these crimes, although you can be sent to jail for multi-year periods of time, the legislature inserted a little device where a judge has the power to do what's called split sentencing. And split sentencing is designed to relieve the overcrowding in the jail that they anticipated AB 109 would result in. And in split sentencing, if you have your car thief, a judge could say sentence him to what we call the mid-range of 4 years. He says, I'm going to sentence you to 4 years. You're going to do 1 year in jail, and the remaining 3 years, we're going to release you, and you're going to do outside on the street. And you will be under mandatory supervision. And we're going to hold that time for you. So we'll hold that 3 years for you outside. And every day that you don't get arrested is a day that gets used up for you. So you're kind of doing your sentence out on the street.
That's and do they have an ankle?
No. Some ankle bracelets are the GPS is used really for certain high risk offenders and sex offenders, high risk sex offenders. These people, the car thief doesn't have a GPS.
So he's basically on their word that they're going to do well. They don't go to jail and or get arrested or anything else.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Wow. So now the criteria has changed a little bit. You touched upon it a tad.
Yes.
About them, what's classified as a felony.
Right.
I was speaking to several police officers in Anaheim where they discussed, the certain levels of felonies. The time frame changed or something. I'm not clear on it. Maybe you can...
Well, the levels of felonies I talked about are the ones that they remove from the eligibility for prison list. And there are some other distinctions in felonies in terms of how you're treated when you get out of custody. So, for example, people who go to prison used to get out on parole. Everyone who went to prison got out on parole. That was another thing that AB 109 changed. Now, the people that get out on parole that you see, almost 90% of those are serious and violent offenders. That means they have committed at some point in their lives a strike. And so if they're on parole, they're being supervised by the state, and they've done something, a very serious crime. The people that are not on parole, by and large, there are a few exceptions, the people that are not on parole are being supervised not by the state anymore, but by local probation officers. That also, as you can imagine, a lot of people who've gotten out of prison who were not serious and violent offenders used to be on parole, and they used to be supervised by the state. Now that's a whole crowd of prisoners, or not prisoners, a whole crowd of releasees that are being supervised by the probation department. So it increased the probation department's workload tremendously as well.
Can they manage it?
So far, Orange County Probation has been doing, I think, a very good job. And I've worked with them very closely in the last year and a half in this area, probationers and mandatory supervision people, and also with the parole department. And I think our probation department has really stepped up to undertake that, but it's cost a lot of money, and they've had to hire a lot more people to do it. So that's cost the county a tremendous amount of resources.
I can imagine so. On that note, what do you think that's doing to the communities? Knowing, some people know about the bill.
Sure.
Does it affect the communities? Does it cause anxiety?
Well, yes, I think it causes anxiety when people hear about it. For example, one of the things that is going on with, if you're a parolee, you've been a serious and violent offender, or you might have been a serious sex offender. We get some of those. And when you come out on parole, you're supervised by parole. If you commit a parole violation, in the old days you could go back to prison for up to 1 year, right?
Okay.
And you'd be off the street. And a parole violation doesn't necessarily mean there's a new crime. You could have tested dirty with drugs. You could have absconded, so your parole officer doesn't know where you are. You could cut off a GPS device, for example, so we can't track you. There are a variety of things you can do to create.
I've heard the penalty for that isn't very steep anymore.
Not anymore. It used to be up to a year. Now, the maximum amount of time you can get is 180 days at 50%.
So 90 days?
90 days is the maximum amount you can spend in a cell. But here's the real problem. You may recall, I told you that now most parolees that are currently on parole and have not been shifted to the lesser supervision, most of those are serious and violent offenders. Mm-hmm. When they get violated, they don't go to prison either. So they're going to go into county jail for that 90 days, if they get that much, even if they get that much. They're in county jail. But these are serious and violent offenders. So this has resulted in a significant shift in the risk of our jail population in Orange County, as well as throughout the state. I don't have numbers, but my participation in this program and talking with jail personnel, there has been a noticeable increase in prisoner-on-prisoner assaults, some serious, some not so serious, but issues, and prisoner-on-guard assaults, because the population has gotten more dangerous in our county jails.
Now, are the guards trained differently in a prison compared to a local jail?
You know, that's out of my area, I think, pretty much. I think there are different environments, so I would imagine there would be some difference in training. Keep in mind, again, in the prison, the convict is expected to stay there for a good long time, and so there might be a completely different dynamic as to how you handle that individual, both physically and psychologically. Whereas in a jail, traditionally, you're going to be a short time, you're going to be in and out because of the nature of your crime. That has sort of changed.
Now we'll go back to a little bit what we mentioned earlier. So they go on parole, they go on probation. Where do they go? I mean, is there a program that helps them get jobs? Is there a program that helps them get education? Or are they really on their own?
There are programs and there are efforts, both private and that are government run, to assist with drug rehabilitation, some mental health care, but I can tell you all those programs are completely full. They're all full, the beds are full. Very often we have an individual that might express he's in custody or she's in custody, and they might express a desire to go to an inpatient program, but the bed's not available. So sometimes they wait for the bed to become available in custody. Sometimes if they're released, if they've served a certain amount of time, they get released. They hit the street without getting to the bed. And if they don't get to the bed, they're going to reoffend. They're going to go find drugs again and or get in trouble again of some kind. It just happens. One of the tragedies, to some extent, with AB 109, on top of putting people back out on the street much earlier than they were before, both probationers and parolees, so they're in custody less time. Besides putting them back on the street, sort of a secondary program, a secondary idea with this legislation was to try to address recidivism by providing much more mental health care, drug rehabilitation, job training, and things of that nature. However, the legislature didn't provide any money for that in any significant way.
They provided no money for it at all?
I wouldn't say no money for it, but the legislature provided X amount of dollars for each county, and each county sort of made the choice as to how they were going to spend that money. So the first thing that happened, of course, is we needed to beef up our probation department.
Yeah.
They were going to be supervising many, many more people. And also, keep this in mind, too. I mean, there are all these little nuances. When a person commits his first couple of felonies and goes to jail and gets out and was on probation and was supervised by a local probation officer, that person didn't have much of a criminal history. They were sort of a newbie. Oh. They'd been to jail a couple of times. The guy that goes to prison, or the woman that goes to prison, the reason they hit prison is because they have a deeper criminal history. They have more behind them. So once they've been in prison and get out, right, I guess, I don't want to use the word hardened, but I will in some respects, they have committed enough crimes or the type of crimes that make them a little further down that criminal road. Those people now came out and were given to probation. So not only did probation have to hire more people to watch them, they had to give probation department much more training to handle potentially more resistant offenders. So it changed their population as well. So all that has cost a lot of money and resources. In many counties, a lot of money had to go to certain police who put together units to assist the probation department to follow some of these people around that were higher risk offenders. So that took some money. And our prosecution efforts, there was money allocated to that. And they really didn't provide much for the back end. So these people are being released early, but not receiving any significant upgrade in any of the mental health or drug rehabilitation care.
That's a tragedy.
So it's two strikes, so to speak. They're getting out too early, and then they're not getting any help.
Yeah, that's a problem. Right now we're about halfway through the show, so if anybody out there wants to make a phone call, the number's on the website right there for you. You can dial that in. We can pick up the phone live. If you want to also ask questions via Twitter, just go ahead and put a hashtag #therapycable. And we'll continue on. Now, obviously, this is a political psychology show, so one of the things I wanted to ask you was, what do you think is the percentage of those people in prison or jail that have problems with addiction?
Well, I think probably quite a few. I mean, probably over 70%, 80%.
Oh, really?
Have problems with addiction in one form or another. I mean, that doesn't always excuse their behavior, but I do think that that has been a significant issue for most of the people that we see. As a prosecutor, I mean, I've seen the particularly violent offenders sometimes that do robberies and some of those types of violent crimes. The level of addiction in those people, it varies. I don't think it's as high. I think people that commit crimes of theft, residential burglaries where they're stealing things, those are the kind of people that probably do have a high addiction rate and manifest that as part of their criminality. We also see, we see a few people that are just addicted, that their primary crimes have been narcotics crimes for some time, possession of narcotics, without necessarily a lot of other types of crimes. So it's a big mix. It's a big mix.
Do you think that is a big contributor to their recidivism?
Well, sure it does. I mean, if you're addicted, because one of the first things that a lot of these people do because of their addiction is when they get out of jail, get out of prison, and they get back on the street, they immediately join up with people they knew before, because you've been put away for a while, and you come back out, and if you go someplace where you don't know anybody, you're kind of stuck. So they tend to gravitate back to their old neighborhoods and their friends, and those people that are out continue to do drugs, and so it's kind of a cycle like that.
That's a dangerous cycle.
Well, and that's the problem with not having drug rehabilitation or mental health care for a lot of these people that when they get out of prison, when they get out of parole based on AB 109.
Now, you're senior deputy district attorney. What are the crimes that you mostly see here in Orange County? We'll try to bring it to local news, I guess you can say.
Well, most of the crimes, I mean, that's theft crimes, of course, are probably the highest. I mean, auto theft, burglaries.
Has that uptick since AB 109?
Yes, there has been an uptick, a clear uptick. I mean, a significant increase in theft, what we call property crimes. Not necessarily violent crimes in Orange County, where people are robbing you or attacking you or assaulting you. But we have definitely seen an uptick of various percentages in different cities. I've heard that some cities have had up as high as 9% increase just since this. Some have less. So, and different cities have different populations as well, as you know, and that sort of makes a difference. But there has been an uptick in property crimes.
Anything else upticked at all? Any other more violent crimes, like you said, assault?
Well, I don't think we have a statistical basis for an uptick in those. Unfortunately, we have some very striking crimes that have occurred recently by people that are on parole or on these new programs that have come out of AB 109. And some of those have been quite dramatic. And one of those, of course, is I can't really talk about the case at all, but the two gentlemen that are implicated and have been charged with 4 murders.
Oh, yes, that's right.
One was a federal parolee and the other was a state parolee, and they both had GPS bracelets, of course. So you get some of those that are sensationalized. I don't really think there has been a statistical increase in violent crime yet that we've detected. I mean, you have striking examples, but not more assaults, for example.
I don't know if you can even answer this, but are those examples something that's due to AB 109, or would they have happened anyway? Would they probably gone on probation anyway?
Well, these people would have been on parole anyway. The real question, though, is what kind of opportunities do they have to do these kinds of crimes? And keeping somebody in, it depends on the crime. Not everybody should be locked up forever.
Sure.
I certainly don't feel that way. I mean, people make mistakes. People are young and have bad judgment, but they can learn from it, and they're not going to commit crimes again. Or if they do, they'll be low-grade crimes that maybe we can control and do something about. But there are individuals that are very dangerous, and frankly, the longer some of those individuals are in a cell, the longer they will not make a new victim. And we have striking examples of that, and striking examples of people that have been released on parole because they have, for example, we're getting these serious and violent offenders on parole who have a history of violent crime. We already know that. Their latest crime, however, might be a shoplift from Walmart, which, okay, that doesn't seem like a big deal. The problem, though, is these still are serious and violent offenders, and they do crimes of opportunity. So they may not be robbing somebody that afternoon, but if they go to a Target store or something, they're criminals.
Sure. And
they have a bent to do that. And these guys have been in the system for some while. So the fact that they commit petty crimes doesn't mean they're not going to commit serious and violent crime day after tomorrow. So,
but they get classified as being petty crimes.
Right. The new crime, if it's classified as a petty crime, then you're not going to go to prison for something like that.
Even though you were a more violent offender before.
Well, it has to do with the release. If you are a serious and violent offender and you commit a new serious and violent felony, then you will go to prison. If you commit one of these non-violent crimes, then you won't. And keep in mind also the fact that when you have this kind of a history, then it's really behooves you, if you release that person early, it just gives them more opportunity to commit these crimes. So, an uptick in violent offenses, I wouldn't be surprised at that. We just haven't seen it just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And the program's been implemented for 2 years now?
I think it's been about 2 years, maybe a little longer than that. I think it started back in 2011, and so 2012, 2013, 2014, maybe about 3 years. The last shoe to drop was in July of last year, about a year ago, when all the parole situations started being taken over. So.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question. If Jeff Ferguson was able to go to the governorship, what would you do to make it better? Would you get rid of AB 109? Would you just change it around, reform it? Would you propose a whole new bill? How would you rectify this issue? It's it's a tough question.
Well, I think
it's a tough issue.
The first thing to do, I think, is to go back to the very core of what the problems were. The problems, at least, were prison overcrowding. And so that's one area to start with. And I think that there are examples of alternatives that you can use. For one, we do send prisoners out of state. We do that on a case-by-case basis. And generally speaking, as I understand it, a prisoner is invited to do that. A state prisoner, someone in state prison, if they don't have a lot of visitors, like they don't seem to have a connection with the community, very often they'll be said, "Hey, do you want to go to a facility out of state?" We'll be happy to do that. And the prisoner has to agree to that. And some of the states, I know Tennessee is one of those states that apparently takes prisoners and so forth, but it's a very small program. So the idea of maybe not asking their permission and housing prisoners out of state in states like Tennessee, Arizona, Texas, whatever the case may be, I think has some promise and some value. And of course, it'll cost the state money, but from all the statistics I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, it would be significantly less expensive to ship and house and pay for a prisoner in Texas than to keep them in California.
So we're still responsible to pay for them in a different state.
Still have to pay for them in a different state, but we're paying at the rate that it costs the state to house them. And
interesting.
Those states, there's clear examples of other states where the cost to house a prisoner is half to a third of what it costs or what we pay in California per prisoner.
Now,
so that's one idea.
Why are states like Tennessee not overcrowded? They don't have the same issues we have. Is it that they have less crime there, or do they have more facilities?
Well,
I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I don't know how other states have managed their crime problem or why they have room. And I don't want to get into why it's cheaper. I think that's a whole other political issue. But so that's one thing. Another thing might be to do some privatizing of jails in some areas.
I was going to ask you about that.
I mean, I think there's a place for that. I don't think that that's really suitable for serious and violent offenders because you have a whole different liability scheme and a whole different problem. But I think for certain offenders that are really in fact low grade, that basically have shoplifted all the time, have committed forgeries, things like that, they still need to be incarcerated. They still need to pay their debt to society, but they can probably do it in facilities that are privately run and manage that. So those are two possible options. As for AB 109, I do think it needs to have some changes. I think, for example, if you are a serious and violent offender, instead of just going to county jail if you violate your parole, I think they should change that so you can go back to prison for a longer period of time, because that serious and violent offender is a very special case. All right.
Sure.
Let me give you an example. I've seen in the last 2 months at least 3 or 4 individuals that have been convicted of forcible rape, and they get out of prison and they're put on a GPS bracelet. And what they do is they cut that bracelet off and then abscond. If you cut the bracelet off, the maximum you can do for that violation is 180 days in jail. And so I would be inclined to encourage the governor or the legislature to consider changing that, because not all these prisoners are the same. Yes. I mean, serious and violent offenders are not the same as the Walmart shoplifter. They're different people. And so I think that AB 109 can be tweaked and fixes can be made in it to make it more reasonable for public safety purposes without sacrificing the rights of the prisoners or getting them whatever they need. So I think there are changes.
And I don't know how familiar you are with this, but what programs do you think are the most effective that reduces recidivism? Any ideas on that? And do you think it's mental health programs, educational programs?
Well, I think it depends on what the nature of the crime is and who the people are. I mean, and how receptive they are. For example, mental health programs have been shown to accomplish a great deal if the subject participates actively in the program, if the subject continues to take their medication. So that's problematic. So mental health programs can help, but there is an issue with being able to follow up and keep that person on the straight and narrow. Same with drug rehabilitation programs. I mean, you have a lot of recidivism. But in Orange County, in my experience, we do have a splendid, relatively speaking, but a good program that the state runs called Drug Court. And Drug Court has shown some significant statistical effects at curbing reoffense, getting back into that drug addiction. There are other programs like PC-1000. PC-1000 appears to have had the same effect as just being arrested for the drug. PC-1000, if you're arrested for possession of a small amount of methamphetamine or cocaine or what have you, you can go into PC-1000, and it's a program of education about drug abuse.
Okay.
But the number of reoffenders who go into PC-1000 is very high. It's extremely high. And so the effect of just being arrested, scaring you straight, appears to have about the same effect as going through that program. So the program is the first program. In the long run, I don't think it's been that helpful. The next group of programs is called, in California and in our county, is called Prop 36. Now, these are programs that are run by the state, or by the county. So they're government programs. Prop 36, I think it's not done well. I think their problems with recidivism continue to be tremendous. One of their philosophies is that in order to get better, you have to reoffend. We accept that. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or an addiction specialist, but that's one of their philosophies, and that's not the only philosophy. And they're all well-meaning people who put these together, but I don't think that has worked well. Drug court has really worked very well. In Orange County particularly, they have a number of what they call community courts. And these are courts that were set up in the last several years to address very special problems. For example, they have a veterans court. And the reason for that, obviously, is because a lot of veterans who've come back from Afghanistan or still have problems from Vietnam, who are just older, many of them are homeless. Many of them have PTSD. And, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to commit crimes. If they're homeless, they might get in a scuffle with another homeless fella, and then you have an assault. Then they're arrested, and then they're charged. So Veterans Court, I think, has done some good things to try to get these guys who were not criminal to start with, potentially. I mean, they have a mental illness that they're coping with, and that has thrust them into an environment where they can become criminals much easier than they would otherwise.
Sure.
So we do have some community courts that I think are very, very useful and have done some good work. Nothing's perfect. I mean, we still have a lot of problems out there.
Yeah, unfortunately we do.
Now, there are a lot of private programs run by several different providers in Orange County, but, those cost money. And so now those beds are full too. There are a lot of people that get in trouble with drugs or with mental health issues, and their families or they themselves have the wherewithal to pay for that. So we do have those programs that I think do good work, but there's just not enough out there to help, and so it's a very difficult problem.
Yeah, I don't know how many shows it would take to actually understand AB 109 completely and all the implications it has caused sociologically, economically, and legally. But we want to thank you so much for coming on to the show, and congratulations again for winning.
Thank you.
You're a judge-elect, Supreme Court judge?
Superior Court.
Superior Court.
Yeah, don't start me there.
Yeah, Superior Court Judge of Orange County. Thank you so much, Jeff Ferguson. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hopefully you've got the insight that we wanted to provide. Have a wonderful time. We'll see you next week.